Hello and welcome back to the Shepherd's Rest Doc Talk. This is episode 16B.
Yay! I'm Cam, this is Julie.
This is the New Testament or the Brit Hadashah portion of this week's Torah portion, which is Lech Lecha, right?
Yes.
All right.
Right.
Is that what it means? No, I'm kidding. All right. So this week's study is Matthew 1 through 17. It's all about the genealogy of Yeshua.
Yeah.
But I'm going to preface it with a verse from 1 Timothy 1, 3, and 4. It said, this is Paul talking to Timothy concerning the church of Ephesus. It says, I appealed to you when I went into Macedonia to remain in Ephesus in order to command some not to teach differently, nor to pay attention to fables and endless genealogies which cause disputes rather than an administration which is in belief. Now, the reason I'm bringing that verse up is because there are a lot of controversies over this genealogy in Matthew and in Luke. Luke has a genealogy, I think it's Luke 3, not sure exactly where, but
It's 3 or 4.
yes, it's 3 something. But his genealogy seems to be different. Now, there's different reasons for that. I'm just going to go over them real quick. We're not going to go into any of them because I just want to concentrate on showing some really cool aspects of some different things concerning the king.
And this is an interesting tidbit, is that there are multiple, and I say multiple, Jews who read Matthew 1 and immediately believe in Messiah Yeshua.
Right.
Just in the genealogy. We don't do that because we're Gentiles. We don't know that. But
Right.
I just think it's interesting that, you know, we may look at it and go, why is it there? Because the Lord uses it. And it's amazing the
Right.
people whose lives are completely changed and believe on Him just from Matthew 1.
Right. And I know that it's relevant, and I know that Luke's is relevant. So
Right.
it's
But
not
you're
in our
right.
best interest to argue over why is this one different and why is
Yeah,
this,
you're right.
Some people think that one is Mary's line and one is Joseph's line. Some people think that the lines kind of intertwine anyway all the way through. There's a curse line of Jeconiah that had to be skipped over. I mean, it goes on and on and on, the arguments, but we're not going to do that because we know Yeshua is the Messiah. We know that he's from the line
Yeah,
of
and
David.
that's not, I can say this, between the two, or that there's actually 3 genealogies, but, and there's actually 4. Because John's is from the Word. I mean, that's his. But even from those, they all point to him. That's never the question whether he's Messiah.
Right. But a lot of people are trying to use it as a dispute
Absolutely. They'll argue or
to
anything.
claim that he's not Messiah. But anyway, we know that he is, and we know that it's important, and someday he'll
Reveal it.
reveal it. That's exactly right. Couldn't think of that word.
I know. I got you back.
Thank you. All right, so Yeshua is the promised king. So let's go to 2 Samuel, and we'll see where this promise verse comes up.
Okay.
2 Samuel 7, 15 and 16. But my loving commitment does not turn aside from him as I turned it aside from Saul. This is Yahweh talking to David. Whom I removed from before you, and your house and your reign are to be steadfast forever. Before you, your throne is established forever. So we know from this passage that he is establishing the coming Messiah through King David.
Right.
We know that. Now, let's talk about history.
Okay.
So the prophecy was given to David that the Messiah would come through his line.
Right.
Now we know in 597, I believe it was,
Yeah.
Israel was taken to exile into Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. And
Because we know Ezekiel went then. So
Yes.
it was somewhere around there, yeah. 590s.
597. I think it was around 597.
I think you're right.
Is when that king specifically went. And he was the last king to sit on that throne. No king sat on that throne after that. And here, it's really
Now, they
interesting.
had people that they put there.
Absolutely.
they
We're going
weren't
to talk
the
about that
right
in a minute.
ones.
We're going to talk about that in a minute. Here's something really kind of cool concerning the moon cycle. It is said by the sages that Israel can be compared to the moon. When she's doing well, it's like the moon waxing
Okay.
Bigger and bigger and bigger. And when she's not doing so well, she's waning, smaller and smaller and smaller.
Okay.
It's also said there were 15 generations from Abraham to Solomon.
Okay.
So from the time the promise was given that you talked about in your portion, there were 15 generations, which represented the moon getting bigger and bigger. And then it was at its fullness when Solomon was king. That's when he built the temple, the splendor, the kingdom was at its biggest, right?
Right.
Well, after Solomon, it just went downhill.
Yeah.
And they just getting worse and worse and worse. And it was 15 generations from them going into exile.
Yeah.
And then there was a short generation.
You mean going into Babylonian exile?
Babylonian exile. So then there was a short generation while they were in Babylon. Then they came back and it began to grow again. And then when Yeshua got here, that was 15 generations later, that it was at its fullest again.
Cool.
So it's just an interesting little...
And of course, that 15 is actually counting Yeshua. That 15 is actually counting Solomon.
Yes.
I bring that up because a lot of, I don't, if you're hearing this, you're going, it's only 14. It's often taught 14.
Well, we're going to talk about that
and
too.
And that 14 has to do with a little
good.
bit different. So I just want to make sure that someone hearing this isn't like, well, that's wrong. It's not wrong. She's saying it's absolutely correct because the count is going to where it's the fullest. Solomon
Which is
the
fullest.
Whereas the other count goes to David, and that's the 14.
Right.
I just want to bring that up.
Absolutely.
Watching.
So Matthew talks about there's 14 generations. 14 from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the Babylonian exile, and 14 from the exile to Yeshua.
Right.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
14, there's a thing in the Hebrew language called the gematria, where they take the letters and add them up, and
that's how we get Gog and Magog to mean the nations.
Right.
Gematria,
right.
The gematria is used all the time. I mean, for all kinds of things.
Right. So David's name is Daled Vav Daled. Mm-hmm. And Daled has a, how do you say it, gematria number of 4. And
well, because it is the number 4. That's the letters are also...
It's the 4th letter in the alphabet,
and it
so it
represents the number 4. And then when you get to 10, then it goes 10, 20, 30, 40. So they're numbers, they have meanings, and they are letters. So that's where they get the 4.
All right, so David is Daled, Vav, Daled, mm-hmm. which is 4, and Vav is 6. Mm-hmm. It equals 14.
Right.
So it's almost as if Matthew, who wrote his gospel to prove his kingship, mm-hmm. is saying, David, David, David,
right.
3 times.
Right.
You know? I mean, there's a lot said for when you hear something in the word 3 times. Holy, yes. Holy, holy, yes. You know. And I love that because that's his point, is to prove that Yeshua is the Messiah through the Davidic line,
right.
and he's the rightful heir, because his entire gospel is written to show that he is king.
Right.
And the rightful king.
Right.
So
which is why it makes sure that lineage goes through Solomon.
Right.
To make sure you understand kingly line. That's the emphasis there.
Very good. Absolutely. So after the Babylonian exile, the government was reestablished, but no one ever really sat on the throne of David as king.
Right.
That was a legitimate king. We
right.
do see in 168 BC the Jewish warriors under the persecution of the Greeks, basically. Mm-hmm. Antiochus Epiphanes was the governor.
You said that so well. I'm jealous.
I can say that word.
Antiochus Epiphanes.
Either say it.
No.
I'm kidding. So we know that Antiochus Epiphanes was the ruler over that area, and he, if you know the story of Hanukkah, the Hanukkah story, he basically forced everyone to assimilate and mix and conform. And so basically the Maccabees mm-hmm. stood up, and there was a whole group of warriors. They were called the Hasmoneans, from the Hasmoneans family. Yes. And they stood up and they said, no, we're not going to take it anymore.
We're not going to take it. We're not going to
I knew that would happen. I knew that would happen. Okay.
They said, we're
not going to take this. And we know the whole story. Basically, they seized the temple, they reestablished the priesthood, and then they put one of their own in as king, But here's the problem. They weren't from the line of Judah.
Right.
They weren't from the Davidic line. They were from the priestly line of Aaron. So they didn't have a right to set up a king.
You can't cross that.
No, they didn't.
Not unless you're of Melchizedek.
Melchizedek.
That one. Unless you're of him.
Yes.
His line,
yes.
then you can.
Then you're after the order of. But even that is a spiritual and a physical.
Right. Well, and that's not allowed. We know in Israel, as Israel here on earth, it's not allowed.
No, that's
it has to be in the heavenly aspect, or like it was before it was separated into Israel.
Right, and that's why Paul says, if he would have been from the priestly line, he would have been.
Right. No, he couldn't.
Yes, he couldn't be a priest because he was not from the priestly line in Hebrews. That's right. All right, so.
And so he'll never take the earthly priestly role. He'll never. Whoever does that, that's wrong.
Yes. So the Hasmoneans, they fought and fought and fought over who's going to be a king. Big civil war in Israel about 60 years before Yeshua was born. And Antipater, I'm not sure who he was at the time.
Oh,
now, I knew who he's going to be.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew who he's going to be. But at the time, he called on Rome because Rome had now taken over, but not in the Judean area. He had called on Rome to come solve the civil war that was being waged. So Pompey gathered up an army and they just marched through and destroyed. They seized everything: Jerusalem, the temple.
Yeah, they solved the problem.
The crown. They did. They completely solved the problem, and they put Antipater as the governor. Well, when Antipater died, his son Herod was crowned king of the Jews.
Right.
Now.
Because he married in, so
also,
that's why he was like, yeah.
That's right. His wife was Hasmonean, and he was a converted Jew. He wasn't even Jewish.
He was Edomite. He was
right.
of Saul's group.
Yes. So
not Saul, Esau.
He was a mean. Did I say mean?
I mean, they said once that it was safer to be
a pig in his court
than his family,
than his own son.
Yeah, or any of his family.
And he was not a kosher king. He may have eaten kosher, but he wasn't a kosher king. But
he wasn't.
No. Deuteronomy 17:15. You shall certainly set a sovereign over you, whom Yahweh your Elohim shall choose. Set a sovereign over you among your brothers. You are not allowed to set a foreigner over you who is not your brother. Yeah. So Herod calls on the sages and the Sanhedrin at that time and says, what does this verse mean? And they said, it means that you have to be only a Jew, only someone who is an Israelite or Jewish can be a king. He didn't like that answer, so he had the entire Sanhedrin killed and all the sages.
There's one that lived.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't read that.
There was one that lives. And
okay,
he comes back later, and then later something happens, and then Herod's like, oh, man, I shouldn't have killed them all.
Oh, so he
didn't repent.
No,
he
really.
Didn't. He was
he repented, but not really repented.
He just thought, oh, I like that answer. Anyway.
So my next point is Matthew brings up 4 women in his genealogy. Yeah, we see Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. Now, Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth are all Gentiles.
Yes.
And Bathsheba, hang on, I got this epiphany after we talked about this morning. Bathsheba was Jewish, but she married a Gentile.
Right.
Which we know when you marry, you become that.
You take the husband.
You take on the husbands. That's why if we're going to be the bride, I'm sorry, but you got to look Jewish. I don't know what to tell you.
And that just means you look scriptural, which we call scriptural now.
Which we call Jewish. Right. But he was Jewish. He was Jewish. So he will.
Psalms
the bride
45,
will be Jewish.
Go read it.
Perhaps the mention of these 4 women were so Matthew could show the redemption of the nations and the inclusion of the Gentiles, because that is what Yeshua ultimately did. His death, burial, and resurrection was to bring the 2 sticks back together and to bring the house of Israel back into covenant with him. Yeah.
So the 4 women.
Yes.
First we have Tamar, who is not Canaanite, but she is Gentile from that area. Then we have Rahab, who is Moabite.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have, the importance of Moabite with these 2, Ruth and Rahab, are both from Lot.
Lot. Yeah, that's
Which
what I was
means
just thinking.
those who
Lot.
came through Abraham but then turned away,
are coming
those still
back
righteous
in.
but
Yes.
not walking, come back in. And then we have this one
Ruth. Bathsheba.
who's Jewish, but
turned away.
leaves because and trust me, I feel quite confident that the man she married he's fighting for Israel.
Right,
so
right,
he is
absolutely.
in there. But the point is, there's still a turn and come back through the king. So
Right.
you have, like you said, all four showing that he brings in from all four.
From
Anybody who
everywhere.
wants to.
Yes.
Yeah.
And four representing the four
Solomon-
corners of the earth.
And
bringing
Solomon-
them back from everywhere.
One of Solomon's first wives is an Amorite. So that's both sides of Lot's children coming back in.
Very good.
Yeah. So
Very good.
that's cool.
Another-
Think about the church.
Yes, yes. Another interesting little, nugget you could get from it is that he may have mentioned these four women because at first glance, when you read in the scripture, all four stories seem a little scandalous.
Yeah. Good
You
point.
know? And what was Mary's? Really? A virgin birth?
Oh,
Seriously?
Yeah. Whatever. We
I
heard
mean,
that one before.
Right.
Not.
Think of how scandalous that
Oh,
was.
yeah.
Not only that, but she was young. That was probably
And then
very
when
scandalous.
she finds out she's pregnant, she's gone for 3 months with her cousin.
Right.
And then she comes back.
comes
Now,
back
I don't remember her leaving like that. I could just hear the rumors, which we know from Psalms. David talks about that. That's what happened with David, too.
Yeah.
Rumors.
Yeah. Yep.
Which it actually goes for David and Yeshua.
Right. All right. Well, I only have one more point. I know. Okay, but let's talk about Luke's genealogy. The point I want to make about Luke's genealogy is Luke went all the way back to Adam.
Right.
And we know that Yeshua is the second Adam.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what he was hinting to because Paul is the one that really reiterates that all through his epistles
Yes.
about Yeshua being the second Adam.
So I think of Luke and I think, oh, well, he wrote for Paul. Okay. And Luke's whole thing is more where he's the son, the man, the son of God aspect. So you have Adam, who's son of God, Yeshua is son of God. Mm-hmm. Think about it. What was Adam's job? He was priest and king idea in the garden, and he was to serve and guard. And Yeshua comes and does the same thing, but he does it successfully. And he serves and he guards.
That's right. That's right.
And then we'll see that king part. See, Adam
Next time.
served, but he never got to the king part. Not like
Right.
fully, obviously. But Yeshua will.
Especially if it's like we think it was and they ended up sinning just a few days after they were created.
Right. Yeah.
He really didn't get to be king
Never
very
really got to
long.
be king very long. No.
No. All right. Well, that's all I have for you today.
Wow, good stuff.
All right. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week. Shalom.